I've changed my career at least 4 times, not just shifting my job, but reinventing my entire professional life. I've been a physiotherapist, a health manager, a project manager, a marriage celebrant, a church minister. I've been a non-profit director and now a productivity consultant kind of podcast YouTube person. And while my career pathway has been particularly interesting, I'm certainly not alone. The average Australian changes jobs 13 times in their life, with many people starting their own businesses or taking up study in their 40s, 50s and beyond. Even so, career resets are tough. They're challenging. It's hard to enter a period of not knowing, of feeling confused, knowing that something has to change, but you're not quite sure how to get there. And yet these periods of liminality and slowing down are super helpful if you know how to transition through them. So in this video, Matt Bain and I will explore a framework from my award-winning book, Spacemaker, about how to set and reset your life during periods of transition. And we'll also hear from Gus Lammerding from Banjo's Bakery Cafes about how they support people to make their own midlife career reset as a franchisor. So it's never too late to reimagine your life and to reinvent your career. Join us for this episode of The Spacemakers, where we help you make space for an intentional and meaningful life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spacemakers podcast, a podcast to help you make space for a meaningful, intentional life. And we are here talking about how to make space for life's inevitable resets. And I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Matt Bain. Welcome.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
Okay, so we are talking about the big idea that the types of habits and practices that set you up for success in your 20s and 30s often hinder progress in your 40s, 50s and beyond. So how do we unlearn old habits that worked in one season of our life in order to set ourselves up for a better second half? And today we're going to talk about
career resets.
Career resets.
Career, it's an intriguing term and a valuable one. I reckon one good way of thinking about it is it's considering both the job that you currently have, the career that you currently have, but also looking at the possibility of the career/job you're going to have in the future, maybe very soon.
Yeah, so what do you do if you feel stuck, if you feel stale? You know that it's time for a sea change, and yet you're not quite sure how to take the next step. We're going to talk about habits and practices and frameworks to help you reset your career and make space for a better life. It is never too late to reimagine your life and to reinvent your career. In fact, according to Australian research, the average Australian changes their jobs 13 times in their lifetime.
It still blows my mind.
Yeah. And a lot of people take up study or start businesses in their late 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond. And so a career reset is definitely a thing in the midlife squeeze. And we want to talk about how to get there. When I think about my life, I've had heaps of job changes and career changes. So in terms of jobs, I've at least had 13 different jobs. If I consider being an ice cream driver and a pizza driver and making tin cans when I was young.
You worked in a tin can factory. That's almost up there like being sent down the coal mines, like in my imagination. You know what I mean? Working in a tin can factory, that would have been rough.
Yeah, I survived for a whole 2 weeks, so I don't know if that really counts.
Okay, yeah,
but I made some mean-looking paint cans. So I've had those kind of jobs before I became a physiotherapist. But then I was a physio. I was a health manager. I've been a project manager. I've been a director of a non-profit. I've been a church minister. I've been a marriage celebrant. I've started a small business. And now obviously I'm an author, productivity speaker,
influencer.
YouTubey kind of try-hard guy in his 47s. It's definitely been true in my life. And so while I've had lots of jobs, I've definitely had probably 4 or 5 actual career changes. And I don't think I'm that unusual in that sense. Like how many you've had lots of jobs too, right?
Before we started recording, we started like bouncing around. I started counting in my head like how many jobs I've had. And I was surprised. I thought maybe 13 was going to be, like just an aspiration, but I'll probably come close to hitting that. But I haven't changed professions as much as you have. Like you made all those transitions look pretty good. Career resets can be tough, right?
Yeah.
Particularly, I imagine if you are, again, in that kind of classic midlife squeeze that we've talked about, so, mid-40s onwards, and if you've been quite successful at your job, right, or at your chosen career, the thought of actually changing professions, I think particularly, could be quite understandably intimidating, because there's a good chance if you made it that far in one profession, you feel that you've got some mastery and you feel pretty competent in that profession. And the thought of having to switch up and do something new Like, that's going to put you in a position of having to be a learner again.
Yeah, you feel vulnerable. I certainly remember feeling quite confused, particularly the big shifts from like a physiotherapist to a church minister or a minister to a small business owner. Like they were big shifts for me. And they were very confronting and challenging. So we're going to talk about some of those stories, but also what you and I have both learnt in that place of unknowing, that space where that something has to change. There's kind of more energy to go forward than to stay with the status quo, because there's enough that kind of propels you to change.
Difficult at times, probably, but definitely worth it. Yeah.
And it's definitely part of what it means to make space for life's inevitable resets, because you can reset your career at any stage, but the reset in your 40s is different than your reset in your 20s. And I think it's important to think through what might it look like to set yourself up for a great career reset. At the end of this episode, we're also going to have a fantastic interview that we had with Gus Lamading from Banjo's Bakery Cafes. He is going to talk about how to help small business owners start their own franchises. And he's got some fantastic stories about working with migrants and people starting their own businesses in the midlife reset to actually start a Banjo's Bakery Cafe. And it's been fascinating to hear some of what he's learned guiding people through that process.
Excellent.
Cool. So let's dive into this episode.
Yeah, so Dan, before we go much further into career resets, though, we want to obviously check back in with the exercises that we asked people to undertake from our last episode.
And we talked about health.
We did. So as per usual, our challenges were aimed at both audiences. So those in their 20 to 30, so that kind of young adulthood phase, and then something different, slightly different for those in the midlife squeeze. So for the 20s to kind of early 40s, we suggested doing something like taking a big swing. So undertaking something that was going to be sufficiently challenging that it kind of helped shape your identity as someone who takes their health seriously and exercise seriously.
Because you're younger, you're more energetic, and you want to build an identity of someone who actually can stretch their physicality.
Yeah, for those who are a little bit older, again, like mid-40s onwards, we said, again, we stress that particularly if you felt that that's been deficient in your life of late, then doing anything is better than nothing, right? Just do something. Just try to build one kind of easy habit. Because again, what's the best type of exercise for you to do? It's the one that you will do. So how'd you go?
What did I do?
Yeah, what did you do?
I had no idea what I was going to do when we finished our episode.
Sure.
And it was interesting because a few days after, I was at a dinner party, and I actually caught up with an old friend, a guy called Al, who actually, Musical Al.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And we had this conversation. I hadn't caught up with him for like years. And we somehow talked about the podcast and talked about health, and I talked about the blood flow restricted cuffs that I talked about.
Yeah.
And he thought that was interesting. And he said he's really into, I don't know what it's called, water therapy, ice cold therapy or something like that. Basically, having really, really cold showers and dipping himself in really, really cold water. And I'm like, that sounds absolutely terrible, because like I'm a guy who wears like a thermal and 3 layers every single day. I'm always cold, and I love my warm showers. And he was like, no, every day he has 2 minutes of completely zero, icy cold, like turn the tap to zero, put it on the coldest setting and just freeze yourself while you time it for 2 minutes.
Wow.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but it
sounds like a lot to me. Yeah.
And basically he dared me to give it a go. And I was like, you know what? 2 minutes is something I could try. And why not? I might like it, I might not, but it's something I've never done. And so I gave it a go. And I've now done it 3 days in a row. And I plan to continue at least for another few to see how it goes. But freezing cold tap, you hold your breath.
Yeah.
You
hold your breath for 2 minutes too.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. It's an incredible feeling, but you do end up feeling very, very awake.
Yeah.
Lots of dopamine.
Yeah.
You feel much more refreshed. And what I've been thinking about is actually it is helping me become the type of person that's can deal with it cold. It makes you a bit mentally stronger, which I like that idea. So I'm not going to promise I'm going to do it every day like he does.
Yeah.
But it was an experiment, and I think it fit what we talked about.
Wow. That's uncanny. Well, it is, because the thing that I've been doing for the last couple of weeks is having cold showers. Didn't see Al. Didn't talk to him about it, but read a book called Death by Comfort, where the author has like a bunch of different exercises and things that you can kind of do to try to make yourself a bit more healthy and resilient. So he talked about the benefits of cold water exposure, and based on his research, he said like 30 seconds minimum will get you like say 80 to 90% worth of the benefits over the past. And his other
Al made me do an extra minute.
He did, yeah. It's because
Oh
like
my
we
gosh.
both know he's a closet sadist, so that probably goes some way. Yeah. And I would have given you exactly the same advice. So his big thing was, again, he used to go, he'd say like I'll do it like 3 days a week, or I'll do it every day that I feel like good enough to go.
Yep.
But then he found he started dodging it. So now it's very simple, black and white. Every day he goes from his hot shower, and then the last 30 seconds is just pure cold.
Right.
Is
that
hard
what
as it goes.
you're doing,
That's
though?
what I'm doing. Yeah. It's just a great way to start the day in terms of feeling really vital and invigorated. And to some degree, it's like, well, what is going to be harder than what I've just done as well? So it's good for that kind of mindset too. But that is so because we didn't talk about this before.
No,
we did.
Apparently it helps inflammation and it wakes you up. It helps you focus. And I have found that. You read a book.
And you're a physio.
And I just got dared by a mate when I was having a beer with him. So anyway, that's interesting. But what I like about this idea is you can do something small, something simple, 30 seconds a day, right?
Yeah.
It breaks your schema. It changes your mindset. And it doesn't have to be cold water therapy, but do something different. Yeah, it's nice.
When you and I have been talking about this idea of career reset, it's funny, like both of us have come back to this same example. And what's really funny is that neither you or I knew that the other had the same conversation with the same person about this very thing. So
Whose name was Al as well.
Yeah, but not the musical Al, but but a different Al. So like a guy who was a mentor to both of us, and I remember very distinctly, and you had the similar experience, having dinner with him once. I was in my early 20s. He would have been probably in his 50s at that stage, and I was talking about like, what do I do with my life, career-wise, right? And at the time, I was feeling a fair bit of pressure to kind of get it right straight away so I could just like dive in and focus on it. And he backed me up a little bit and said, no, Matt, it's like this. You've got to imagine, not just like now, but your career between now and say your 60s. And he said, here's a great way of thinking about it. You have to imagine that between your 20s and your 40s, it's like someone has brought to you 4 or 5 jigsaw puzzles. And what they've done, like they haven't asked you what kind of jigsaw puzzles you want to do. They've just like given them to you. They've taken the top off the box and then they've like dumped all the pieces on your table and scrambled them. So you've got all these puzzles right in front of you and you don't know which bits go with which ending. So he said the 20s to the 40s is basically you sorting through all those pieces and working out which bit goes into which particular puzzle. So you've got all these options. You don't know what the end result is going to be, and you're trying to discern between them, all these different options. That's your 20s to 40s in terms of career.
So you're just trying to work out what puzzle pieces belong to you.
And you're trying to work out like out of all these puzzles, like what's the end goal for each of them. So that's your 20s to 40s, right? And then he says, really, the trick between your 50s, 60s and onwards is deciding which puzzle do you actually want to finish and complete.
Hey, that connects a lot with other episodes that we've had. We talked about productivity and how when you're young, you want to swing at everything. So it's a bit like, try lots of different puzzle pieces out. But then when you hit your mid 40s, 50s, you actually need to be selective in your swing and say no rather than yes to lots of stuff. Because you've got to get rid of a lot of puzzle pieces. So these are the puzzle pieces that are mine. These are outside of my wheelhouse. I can do them, but they're not the things I'm going to focus on.
Yeah, like not to put too fine a point on it, but sure, you could do any of those puzzles. Yeah. But you can't do all the puzzles.
So you have to make a choice. And that's hard when you've got the capacity to do any of these puzzles or many of them well, and everyone's actually asking you to keep doing those puzzles. But it's like, no, I actually have to have focus.
Yes.
And I think that leads in really well to the career reset stuff we're going to talk about, because I think the difference between a career reset in your 20s is you just want to try something new. You might get an opportunity and you give it a go. Or someone might say, hey, you could do this, or there's a job promotion that comes up, and you kind of stumble your way through different types of opportunities or even different types of careers, and it often works. But then it's time to put the puzzle together. And so by the time you hit, let's say, your mid 40s and 50s, you actually want to slow down, make space, and really think deeply about who you are, what you value, what you want your end goal to be. And it's that slowing down making space that becomes really critical in making one of your final resets, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And maybe your most important reset too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you end up saying, hey, I finished this puzzle.
Yeah.
And that was something that was meaningful. It was worthwhile. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but at least it's the puzzle I was meant to finish. And we talked about a book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, I think, last episode. And one of the regrets of the dying is that I regret that I lived someone else's life. And I think that's an interesting idea. It is easy to go on autopilot and just to go up the next rung of the ladder, or to just do the next thing, or to do what your parents think you should have done, or what the colleagues around you or your friends are doing, and realize you've actually been sleepwalking through life following a script that isn't your script. All right, so Matt, let's talk about the set and reset framework. Now, I've written this up in my award-winning book, Spacemaker, and it's connected with lots of people. It's based on conversations I've had and coaching I've had with people who are in reset, and also, I suppose, an examination of the types of things that worked for me through different, particularly career transitions, not just job transitions. I think of this quote from Stephen Covey, who says, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, then every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster.
I think, like, just on face value, obviously it means that you could feel like you're making progress because you are, because there's movement. You're actually like changing positions, but it's all like ultimately it's almost futile because again, you're actually headed in completely the wrong direction. You're probably getting further away from where you're supposed to be going because again, your ladder is up against the wrong wall.
Yeah, you're going further away by making progress.
Yeah,
and I've definitely seen that. So when I was a physiotherapist, I did get to a stage, I was a clinical physiotherapist, and I just felt like I was completely stuck. Like I didn't love the job. I'd been in it for a long time. I knew that there were, I kind of guessed that there were other strengths and skills that I couldn't use in this type of career. And yet, like, all I knew was physiotherapy. Now, eventually I was lucky enough to go up the next rung and I became a manager, and that opened up different opportunities. But it wasn't until I stopped being a physio altogether and entered the world of consulting that I realized, oh my gosh, like there are ladders everywhere.
Although you felt stuck, like your words, you were still really good at being a physio.
People would say I was a good physio.
Yes,
I just knew I would never be a great physio. I didn't have the strengths or the skill set to be like an incredible physio. And I wanted to be incredible at something.
Yeah, but from the outside, looking in, if you were looking at, I guess, for science, tangible science, am I in the right spot? You would have had people affirming what you were doing, and you would have been, and you had some marks of success and progress. So people would say, hey, Dan, great job with that puzzle. And so that kind of makes it more confusing.
So let me talk about the reset and set framework first. So in terms of the framework, imagine a line like a wave. Okay, it goes up and down. You've got peaks and troughs. And so I call this set and reset. And so throughout the landscape of life, there are going to be periods of, let's say, your career where you feel like you're at the top of the wave, you're at the peak. And I call that a period of set, where you feel comfortable in your job, you feel like you're in the right place, you've got goals that you're excited about, maybe new opportunities. Then you hit reset, which is like a trough, where you just enter that space that we've talked about, where something needs to change. You might feel stale in your job. It might be that something's changed, like your boss has changed and you're not getting along with them, or you're just stale in the job and the role that you're in. You might experience just this desire for something more interesting. There can be lots of reasons that you want to reset. Whenever you hit that period, you need a different set of habits than in set. The habits that allow you to be successful when you're set in a career almost need to be unlearnt and undone in a period of reset. And so that's what I want to talk about.
Sure.
Let me introduce the set and reset framework from my book, Spacemaker. And so it's based on my coaching experience with people in reset, but also based on some of my own stories. And so imagine you've got a wave. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and it goes down. And in the peaks, that would be your periods of set, and in the troughs are the periods of reset. And look, throughout the landscape of our life, we all experience various times where we feel set. So they're the peaks, where you feel like you know what job you're in, you're happy about your place that you live in, the relationships that you have. It could be for anything, but for jobs, it could be I'm in a new job, or I'm excited about the role I have. I like my profession. I have goals that I'm trying to work towards. I just have to nut down and get it done. Okay, and so I like set because you know where you are. You feel like you're clear about your purpose and you just need to make stuff happen. But then you hit this kind of drift down to reset, which is that kind of bottom of the curve or the bottom of the wave. And you start to feel like something needs to change, but you're not quite sure what. And it can be lots of things that trigger a kind of a process of reset. You know, sometimes you just feel stuck or stale. Sometimes there's a conflict. Sometimes you feel like you've just been in the job for so long and it's lost that excitement or that kind of buzz, or you feel like you do need a change, but you don't know where you'll go. But whatever it is, it's a period of unknowing. And that's what's hard about reset. You actually don't know where you're heading. And yet you have a deep sense that something has to change. So we might call this a space of liminality.
What I'm wondering is that, like, could the reasons for that, so the reasons that lead to those feelings that you were talking about, they could be beyond your career. As in, so could a reason for a reset, for example, be something's changed in my family situation, so I need hence to change my career because maybe I've got these family demands that are suddenly so understandably taxing on me. They need my attention. I can't invest so much time in my career, so I need to reset my career.
Big resets would be marriage,
Yep.
so it changes things, but particularly kids,
Yes.
like you said, you know, okay, I've got kids now, my priorities have changed.
Yeah.
The energy or focus I have on my job needs to be different, so therefore I need a reset. I mean, the pandemic was a time for many of us to take stock and make space to think about the life we're living, and a lot of people made a decision to change their jobs or careers as a result of that. Now, they didn't always stick, because sometimes it was a knee-jerk reaction or it wasn't well thought out, or maybe the opportunities weren't there. But, you know, certainly broad trends can also lead to large-scale resets.
Yeah. Secondly, what about like the risk of, you know,
Oh, there was a great quote I read. It was something like, the grass is always greener where there's more shit. So
that's some classic poetry right there.
classic poetry right there. Yeah, look, so there is a difference between the type of person that just loves to do the next thing, you know, and that's quite different. You know, someone who constantly changes jobs because they just get bored, or they like a job, it's exciting, and then suddenly it becomes hard and they realize they're actually not as competent as they think. Some of their, you know, character is exposed, or maybe some of their lack of skill is exposed, and rather than actually dig down and actually master the skills they need through deliberate practice and hard work, they end up making a jump. So that's the grass is greener type of thing. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about a deeper values-based intrinsic change, which requires a sense of pain and thought. And look, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you do need to try something and realize, actually, I did need to try that. But it's not the habitual jumping from one lawn to another well-manured lawn.
And what about, like, I mean, what about if you're someone, and these like they're probably like a pretty rare breed, one of the few people like that just seems to have a sense of calling in terms of what they were meant to do over the course of their entire career. Like, so are there people out there who, again, you know, if I was one of those people, I shouldn't be sitting at home thinking, man, well, there must be something wrong with me because I've never really felt this need for a career reset.
So I would say that might be a job reset then, but not a career reset. I'd be surprised if you're in one job for your whole life in our current day and age. And if you are, good on you. Like, there's no criticism of that, but I think it's not common. What I find helpful is the what Cal Newport talks about with lifestyle-centric planning. We won't go into great detail because that's probably another topic all by itself. But he suggests that it's not helpful to have one very strong, singular defining goal that defines your identity. So let's say you're going for the gold medal in the Olympic Games. You get that gold medal, then many people get depressed because their entire existence has been around one singular goal at the exclusion of all else, and actually it can unbalance you. So his lifestyle-centric planning idea is more when you have a sense of calling or goal or vision for your life, it should encompass, let's say, career and work, but also place and friends and health and spirituality, you know, to have a broader imagination of the type of person you want to become. And that, I think, in itself allows for a little bit more flexibility. Sometimes your imagination of what really matters and what you're chasing becomes a bit wider as well, and not so narrow and competitive and goal-centric.
Oh, man, it's like it becomes both multifaceted
Yep.
and I think richer as a result, but also more importantly, more robust. Yeah, it's not so fragile. If your sense of being and self is really all kind of predicated on doing this one thing and achieving this one thing, again, if you get it, you're kind of damned because then what next? And then if you don't get it, you're kind of damned because, well, I failed.
So let's talk about the habits of set and reset. So when you're in a period of set, so you're riding the wave, you're in a job and you know what you want to achieve, well, then what are the habits and practices you need to achieve? And this is the stuff, like I think I put this in the core productivity bucket. You know, you need to set a goal. You want to break your tasks down into tangible next steps. You want to plan your week so that your week represents something of the longer term goal you want to achieve. You want to put it into your calendar so you've got time blocking so your calendar represents your goals. Essentially, you want to work hard, get through tasks, tick things off your list, and spend a lot of your mental energy thinking about what is the very next step to achieve the goal that I'm aiming for, or what's the very next thing I need to do to be successful in this current role I have. So it's very distracting to spend a lot of time thinking about big picture ideas about, am I in the right job? Am I in the right place, the right career? When you're in set, you actually need to be focusing on, what should I say at this next meeting? How do I prepare this agenda, and how do I sit down and actually write that next part of the presentation? And that's how you succeed in set. But then you hit a period of reset and you're unsure of what you need to achieve. And so you don't want to push harder and faster into the habits of set in reset. You know, a lot of people try to work harder or work faster or try to grab at a new idea or a new solution. I think that's the grass is greener type idea, where you just jump at something because you have to solve it and you have to keep moving.
Okay.
Whereas I would actually say if set is about moving fast, reset is about moving slow. I like the work of Robert Buford, who wrote Halftime. It's an older book now, but he suggests that when you hit a halftime, which is essentially a reset, the secret is to slow down and to slow the process down deliberately, to not grasp at the next thing, and to allow a lot of space and time to pause and reflect and think about your values, your beliefs, to think about what you've liked about your past roles or your current role, to think about the types of role that you would like to have, or the contribution you want to give, or the broader significance you want to have in your life. And all of that takes a bit of time. And it's a different set of habits than set.
Yeah.
So when I'm in a period of reset, I spend a lot more time in silence. That's my personality, but I go for long walks on the beach and I think. I write in my journal. I typically revisit my Clifton Strengths assessments and maybe Myers-Briggs and other things. So I kind of look at what my personality type is and how I can work from a place of strength in order to move into this new season. I'll have conversations with friends, or I typically get mentoring in this space where I start to actually bounce ideas off of others. It's a different type of activity. So you're not staying still. You're not doing nothing like, you know, watching lots of Netflix and kind of scrolling TikTok reels. That truly is wasting time. But it's about holding an active space, or what I call actively doing nothing. And it's in that space where you discover the next step, and then you do the next step, and you spend more time making space, and eventually you discover, hey, now I'm not a physiotherapist anymore. I'm this weird productivity guy doing podcasts.
I like that, and it makes sense to me. But I'm also aware, I suppose, if I put on my, you know, like my realist, pragmatic hat as well. No, it's like seriously, because I think this matters, because there's going to be some people who are listening to this going, look, man, I'm pretty certain that I'm in like a phase of reset. Okay, so I'm feeling, again, I've got those feelings of discomfort, or maybe just feeling stuck, and or I've got these other life demands over here that mean it's really hard for me to sustain the pace at this particular career. But they may not be in a position, because not everyone is obviously, where they've got the capacity for the equivalent of the long walks on the beach. They're not so kind of heady that they're inclined to journaling, or they just like they don't have the financial means or the time for, say, like, you know, to pay for professional coaching, you know, or a mentor, you know. So it's like, how do those folk who just probably more going to be, because of whole of life stuff, more time poor, or don't have the financial means to be able to access a bunch of other resources that we can draw on to give us perspective. Like, how do they go about this?
Yeah, so look, I think you've mentioned two things that I've heard. One is about time poverty and the ability to make space to reflect deeply on your why, your goals, your purpose, strengths. And the other one is about the financial means. So let me separate them, because I think they're different. So in terms of the time question, I just don't buy it. Like I ask audiences all around Australia, if you had 2 hours of guilt-free space to do something where you would nourish yourself, self-care, do something that really energized you, you can't catch up on housework and email, you just have to do something that you value, what would you do? And everyone says, like, I'd go for a walk on the beach, I'd think, I'd have a coffee with a friend, play guitar. And then I say, who here would spend 2 hours a week scrolling, fairly meaningless social media? Everyone puts a hand up. Who would spend 2 hours a week on like Netflix or, some type of kind of streaming service, which doesn't add a whole lot of value to their life? Everyone puts their hand up. We have the time. We're just filling it with low quality digital activity because we're so smashed and exhausted. And I'm not saying you have to spend like 8 hours every day meditating at the beach. I'm saying that for the next few months of a period of reset, do some journaling like once a week, half an hour, or spend half an hour walking, and thinking. Or phone a friend and actually have a conversation, etc., and say, hey, what do you think I'm good at? Or do a Clifton Strengths test. It takes like 40 minutes online. It's $30, $40. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can do that type of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I guess if you were being like hypercritical, you might suggest that the kind of people who turn up to listen to someone like you talk for 2 hours and put their hands up are the kind of people who have that kind of time. Whereas it's the people who are even too busy or too, like, life is just pressing them so bad, they're like pulling multiple shifts at the tin can factory that they can't. I'm just like pointing out maybe there is a slight kind of like white collar, professional knowledge worker, perhaps like bias to this.
I think in terms of time, no.
Okay.
But everyone has 2 hours they could find if they really, really wanted it. Maybe in terms of self-efficacy, skill set, the ability to find different paths to solve your problems, to have that level of skill for self-awareness, that I agree. Totally agree on that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the time piece, I don't buy that. I think if you really want something, you can make it happen.
Okay.
Because we're not talking about large chunks of time. But I'm happy for the pushback. We always
I'm happy
agree to disagree.
I'm happy to try to be a working class hero here.
Exactly. Hey, in terms of the money piece, I agree with you. Like, not everyone can afford coaching, but I haven't had coaching in every period of time. So
no, sure.
Look, at one point I was lucky enough to work in the health sector, and I actually got some free coaching through like a mental health plan, so that was helpful. So there are some services you can access through different plans. But look, some of the most valuable guidance I've had has been talking to my mates.
Yes, yeah, that's
calling
good.
them up and saying, I'm stuck and I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to change my job, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And, to call someone who's either done it or someone who you trust. I had a friend who sat me down at some stage, this is during my physio reset, and said, let's pull out a piece of paper and write down all the options that you could come up with, and then just kept pushing me to come up with even more options until I found one or two ideas, and then I could work out maybe a next step.
Yeah,
so I don't think it has to be a professional coach.
Yeah, that's good.
What I will say is I don't think you can have a successful reset unless you take time to invest in it. And the investing in it requires slowing down, making space, and thinking about what comes next.
Yeah.
And it's worth it because you're talking about your life. So I did say I would share some of my reset experiences. And so my first big reset was, I was about early 30s. And I'd been a physiotherapist for over a decade. It was a safe and secure career. I was skilled at it. I'd done a degree. I was known as a physio. I was being paid pretty well. And I'd moved into management at that stage. So, things were going pretty well for me. But I just felt that it was time for a change. And there were a number of reasons for that. Partly I had actually had a taste of the job above me. And the higher I tended to go up in the health sector, the more I just did admin and meetings. And that actually wasn't what I liked. And it wasn't what I was good at either. So I kind of felt like I was a little bit stuck on the ladder that I was in because actually going up was to go backwards in terms of life enjoyment. And at the same stage, I'd actually started this fun, energetic, kind of crazy businessy thing called Space Makers, which I do now. And it was never meant to be a business. We basically wanted to teach our colleagues how to deal with their email inbox because I had skills in that space and I'd learnt some stuff. And my friend and I, Tim Hines, were interested in helping others. And so we created an ABN and started to train people in Email Ninja. And I just started to build some momentum to the point where I actually wasn't able to do the work that was coming in off the side of my desk. We were basically seeing clients from 5 to 6 o'clock at night, and that was our only time spot. And at the same time, I'd been the chair of my church board for a long time, and our senior minister had left, and we really couldn't find someone. We needed someone, and I was asked if I would step in and do the job. And I actually felt very compelled to do it, but I didn't have the time. So I had these I was basically kind of doing 3 jobs at the time, working super hard. I had young kids as well. You know, I was doing everything in terms of set, working harder, doing longer hours, pumping out tasks, trying to juggle 3 jobs, trying to be a Superman. And I started to get breathless. So I started at first feeling breathless when I was standing in front of my team, kind of let's say team meeting, and I just felt breathless, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I felt breathless at the dinner table, and I started to feel breathless reading, you know, the Gruffalo to my kids at night. And so, you know, and feeling breathless made me worried about being breathless. So I had lung function tests, I had heart tests, and look, thankfully there was nothing wrong with me physically. But when I spoke to my GP, he heard about my 3 jobs, and he said, I think you're overcooking it, and I suspect this is stress and anxiety. And that was a really confronting thing for me, to realize that actually behind the scenes, I knew I had to make a change, and I was resisting it, and I was working faster and harder to try to juggle more balls at the same time. And actually what I needed to do was just accept that I was in a period of reset and change my habits. And that was a really big eye-opening moment for me. I know I've shared some of this story in a previous season, but what this was for me was recognizing, yes, it's time to make space, it's time to slow down, it's time to stop. And I'd seen a friend who had actually continued pushing on, a few years older than me. He was a CEO of a large kind of organization, and he ended up in ICU with significant health problems and has never had the same resilience to work at that level again. And I could see actually if I just keep pushing harder and ignore my health, I'll end up in that same space. So thankfully I had that friend as an example. And so I got to pause, and so I took some time off work. Luckily I had some sick leave banked up. I got some coaching through the employee assistance program at work, and that's where I did some of my career reset thinking, which was helpful to a point. And I started to really think about the type of job I wanted and the type of life I wanted to live. And so that's where I started to have more intentional times of silence and journaling, and it's where I learnt to start to pay attention to the aha moments, what I call kairos moments. And I also got another coach where I started to reflect on how do I care for my own health. So it was a very formative period of time, but it took quite a long time. I didn't just jump. It took about 6 months, I think. And there were 2 aha moments that truly cemented it for me, because the question was not just how do I care for my health, but how do I dump 2 of these jobs because I was overcooking it. And the one conversation was with my physio manager at the time, and she was an amazing manager. I once said she was the best manager I ever had, but then I realized she was the last manager I ever had as well. So, and she basically said to me, oh, look, I can see your heart's not in this like it used to be. I know that you've got a lot on, but we would like to keep you. Instead of working as much as you're working, if you want, you always have the option of having a 1-day-a-week job with us. That way you'll be, you know, you can do whatever you want basically, and that way you'll be safe and secure if, you know, business and other things don't work out. And that should have been a beautiful thing to hear, but I just felt super angry and just almost felt like there was rage inside of me. And so I reflected on that emotion later on, and I realized that actually I already knew that I knew what I had to do. I had to quit my job. And actually to keep a simple, easy, permanent part-time physio job would keep pulling me back into something I knew I should actually leave. So I actually made a decision that day to resign from physio and quit. So that was one big aha moment. The other big aha moment was a week later, and you know this story.
Yeah, it's a great story.
I was chatting with our mate Pete, and he's a straight shooter. And I said, oh, Pete, he ran a consulting business a bit like Spacemakers. And I said, oh, Pete, I've made a decision. I'm going to quit my job and be a full-time business owner. And he looked at me and said, that would be so dumb. And he was right, because I would have actually had to earn enough money to pay for the mortgage, and businesses don't go from nothing to something all of a sudden. And look, through those 2 aha moments, I realized I should quit my job, but keep some casual physiotherapy work on the side. I started to do a small amount of paid work for my church. I started to build my business up. It was a much better mix, and I was back into set. And from that point on, it was like, okay, I have to earn money, I have to get clients, I have to build training courses, I have to somehow make this new mix work for me. And I stopped taking those long, long walks on the beach, and I started to focus again.
That's interesting. It looks very different.
It looked very different, and that came about through that deep reflective process and slowing down.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful to put a bit of meat on the bones in terms of what it could look like.
That's a really good story to help illustrate these principles in someone's real life. Obviously, like, we've kicked around a whole lot of ideas this episode, lots of ideas, lots of concepts. It's such a big and important topic that we really want to give it its due. So next episode, we've made this like a two-parter. So next episode, we're really going to be diving into the habits, some really good habits and concrete practices to help you regardless of whether you find yourself in a set or reset stage.
Yeah, and irrespective of your season of life.
Given that next week is going to be so practical, what we'd like people to do this week, so in between, is just stop and spend some time reflecting upon whether they think they're currently in a set stage or a reset stage.
And you may be in a period of set in career, but reset in your relationship, or a period of reset in where you're living, or set elsewhere. So think
relationship
about it.
resets.
Yeah. So think about it in terms of your life.
Yeah.
You know,
your
so
whole
I just
life,
don't want to make it simple.
Yeah.
You may not be set in everything. So take some time to think about it.
Yeah. Maybe also, like, you're in a stage where you thought you were somewhere before this episode, but now you're starting to question whether you actually are in, say, reset. As usual, just take 30 seconds. 30 seconds to stop, pause, take some time out to start considering and working out where you are, set or reset.
Hi everyone, I'm super excited to be here with my friend Gustav Lammerding from Banjo's Bakery Cafes, and we've been working together doing productivity stuff, but we're going to talk about what it means to help people in a midlife reset by starting their own careers, by being a franchisee. So welcome, Gustav.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. I really appreciate it.
I've been working with your team at Banjo's, helping with productivity and helping shape some of the practices of your team.
Yeah.
You found some of that useful?
Yes, very much so, especially the email ninja.
Okay. Have you got your inbox to zero?
Not at the moment, but I'm working towards it, I promise you.
Well done.
But the methodology of that is really sound.
None of it's rocket science, but what's hard is to implement these things. Hey, so we're also talking about how to help people with a career reset. The reason I wanted you on this show is we've had some fantastic conversations about how you and your team have worked with so many different people, migrants and people from different backgrounds, and help them start their own jobs by being franchisees.
There's a fantastic franchisee in Cairns. He's a Tasmanian, but he moved to the Gold Coast many years ago, and he was a refrigerator mechanic. And he's obviously still had some ties back to Tasmania, and then an opportunity came up to open up one of the very first drive-thrus in Queensland, in Edmonton, which is close to Cairns. And he went into partnership with one of the existing franchisees, and they set it up in Cairns. And it is such a fantastic story because him and his wife, they run it together, and they went up to Cairns, and they just decided when they went there that virtually on holiday, they were like, this is amazing, we're just going to do this. They jumped into the business, and they have been thriving. So to the extent that he's actively looking for a second site.
Okay, and how long has it taken for him to go from one site to ready
I think it's 3 years.
3 years, that's pretty fast. So I know, look, obviously you have an accent, you're a migrant yourself.
I am.
And I know you have a heart for supporting people who come from, overseas.
Another franchisee of ours, in fact, we've just opened up his 4th store. So he's really dynamic in that way.
Where's he from?
He's from Pakistan.
Okay.
So he, as a student, he came to Australia. He studied in Australia, and he went back to Pakistan and went to go and work in his family business. and then realized that his heart was actually in Australia. At that time, he had met his wife, and they got married and so forth. And so he made the decision to come back to Australia. He found Banjos, and he dove into it. He went through the self-raising program in record time. He worked very hard, and he opened up his first store. In fact, he opened up the very first drive-through in Queensland in 2020.
So I hear you say work hard. I mean, was he a baker?
No, he wasn't a baker at all.
So what do you need what type of characteristics would you say you need to start a store, or start your own business?
You need a bit of tenacity, but you don't have to have business skills as such. There's a lot of our franchisees which have worked themselves up through the system as bakers and front of house staff, store managers, and they would not necessarily classify themselves as business people, but then they go into the self-raising program and we teach them that. So
teach them business through the program.
Yes, and then they become business people. So the backgrounds, like I told you, our Cairns franchisee, he was a refrigerator mechanic. Our first drive-through, the franchisee that came from Pakistan, he was in business. His family business was in textiles, so it's vastly different from baking.
Sure. But he just was hardworking. He had business now and was ready to give it a go.
He was ready to get his hands dirty. So you'd see him in the bakery, doing the bread dough and making the pies and all that. So if you get your hands dirty, you build a lot of respect with your teams, and then the quality of the product that gets out there is really good. You need to have a feel for that, and you can't get a feel for that if you don't get your hands dirty.
And that would be business generally.
Exactly.
So you've mentioned the self-raising program.
The self-raising program is another channel of support that gets offered by Banjos head office. It is a program that is a 6-month program that was developed in-house and covers everything from making donuts to your actual finances and tax and so forth.
Okay. So I'm interested in knowing how to make donuts. I don't know about the tax, but
I think the donuts might be a little bit more difficult than the tax, to be honest.
So last quick question: if you had one bit of advice for someone who wanted to career reset and start their own business, with yourself or even with others, what would you say?
I went through a career reset myself. I worked in advertising in my earlier career, and I decided to go and study further and cross over into strategy and marketing, which is the corporate side. The best thing I did was to literally just take the jump. Just have a bit of faith and just take that leap. Because if you do that, then you can actually see what you can achieve. You're so much more than what you think you are. Most of the time, if you jump, you can see you can fly. My one piece of advice is, if you think you can do it, you can. So just take the leap.
Look, that is great advice. I think that's great life advice as well, because once you've leapt, you've got no other choice but to fly.
Exactly.
So take the plunge. Thank you so much for coming on our show. It's great to have a conversation with you, Gustav, and we will continue working together in other capacities outside of the show.
Yeah, and thanks for everything that you have done for us and our teams as well. It's been really enlightening, and the fact that you have helped us with our productivity has freed up space for me to actually be here. Otherwise, I would not be here.
That's a good thing. I appreciate it. Thanks, Gustav. So, Matt, we've talked about a lot about reset and career reset. It's a big topic. I thought it might be good to give people a few helpful resources that we have if they want to dive in further. So we have a web page where you can download a PDF and get a free chapter of my book, which is the chapter which explains the set and reset framework in great detail. So if you're interested in the set and reset framework and the activities that I outline in my book, Spacemaker, you can download the chapter for free, plus a PDF to help you shape your life plan at spacemakers.au/life plan. We also have a brand new e-learning course, Priority Samurai. I'm so excited about this. It's been launched recently after 10 years of thinking about this. And so if you go to prioritysamurai.com, you can get 3 free videos and really find out how do you achieve your goals and priorities in a period of set.
Yeah.
So that's really about how do you achieve the stuff that matters.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, if you're interested in engaging us for reset coaching, we are launching a new kind of a reset coaching cohort in the style and vein of my productivity masterclass. So that's online for just over an hour a fortnight in a group of 6 people. We do it over a period of time, and it's a great way to connect with other like-minded people who are going through a career reset, and for us to guide you through a very targeted, specific framework that we've developed. So we're taking interest, a new intake for next year. So contact us at info@spacemakers.au if you want a conversation with one of us about
that's right.
coaching.
Well, and maybe on that, like in that conversation, if you like long walks on the beach and journaling and having coaches, then maybe it's reference all that stuff so you'll get Dan. If you prefer to like to talk about stuff over a beer, I'm your guy.
That sounds good. Looks like I'm out of work. One last resource. I know we're giving you lots of different ideas, but I have a heap of videos on YouTube about career reset, about way power, about Kairos moments, all the kind of different concepts we've talked about. They're obviously free. Look up my YouTube channel, Spacemakers.
So next week, as we said, we're going to be looking at some really concrete, practical actions and habits. And if you're the kind of person who's come across, if you've read a bunch of books or listened to podcasts and stuff on this subject, the idea of following your heart when it comes to your choosing your career, we're going to be perhaps debunking that. I think it'd be safe to say. We're going to be talking about Cal Newport's fantastic idea of deliberate practice as an alternative to just following your heart. And we're also going to be looking at the great idea of actively, sounds strange, I know, actively doing nothing. And that can help us out when it comes to a career/relationship/whole world changing reset.
That is fantastic. I'm looking forward to this episode. But until next time, make space.
Make space.